We have a lot of questions. First of all, the old way of protecting ourselves has sometimes been referred to as gates, guards, and guns. Do you have a similar way to describe the new approach that you're advocating?
I'm going to start that, then I'm going to ask my colleague Jim Quigley from Deloitte to add to it, because he led this work. This is okay if I have other people?
Yeah, sure, but people have to come to the podium.
Okay, good. Yes, that was the way we describe it. You could have called that check in the box, and Jim's work has found it quite differently. Jim?
What we've done with our research is just tried to look at the universe of risks much more broadly than just those that could be a physical interruption of a supply chain or an operation. And the risk intelligent organization then can see uncertainty. They look at uncertainty and then manage that uncertainty and can find competitive advantage. As Chad said, each change, each uncertainty has two dimensions. One is a risk or a threat, and another is an opportunity. And we believe risk-intelligent organizations can look at that total universe of risk and then be able to see opportunity, identify strategic options, and actually find competitive advantage through this process. The other important finding was many companies do risk management in a siloed kind of way. There are many people inside the organization looking at an individual dimension of risk, and we believe the risk intelligent organization actually comes together and looks at risk much more holistically and looks at the interdependencies that are available there. And so I think it is much more than just simply the physical risk that is the source of competitive advantage today.
How do you create a resilient enterprise from the corporate suite?
Walk the talk. It's fundamentally what you spend time viewing. It's the metrics you have in the organization. It's what you reinforce. It's how you spend your time. I send a letter to our employees about every 2 weeks. And I will start every one of those letters with some core value around security or safety. And so you just don't talk about it when the issue is there. You have it all the time, and you are indeed resilient in what you're doing. And you don't tolerate any leaders in the organization that don't value it.
You're here in Washington to talk with policymakers. Are you concerned that our current environment, economic and homeland security policies or policies that are being proposed are either inadequate or just plain wrong-headed?
I wouldn't say Washington is inadequate or wrong-headed. No, I think, and Tom Ridge, the first Secretary of Homeland Security, is very active in the council and was of our key advisors as we've done this work over several years. I think they've done an extremely good job. I think they've taken a number of steps. A number of the steps they have to take are absolutely better for our security, and some are to assure people that they've taken steps. Now, I would not underestimate the need to take certain steps that psychologically make people feel better about what's going on. I think they've made great progress, but I think as we look at the multitude of threats now, not just terrorist threats, but the weather threats that might be more prevalent because of climate change, we do have to think about it in a much more holistic way.
What is the #1 biggest risk today for most businesses? Would it be weather, oil price volatility, terrorism?
When you read our report, you'll get the answer to that question.
I don't have time right now.
But it does vary by industry. But we ask mayors the same question, and it was bio or chemical hazardous attacks were #1 on mayors. And if I was theorizing, I might have come to a different conclusion, but that's what our study showed. It said in the insurance industry, obviously weather. But if you look in process industry and traditional industry, reliability of computer systems was very high on the list.
Some crisis management consultants say, quote unquote, smoldering crises are the most dangerous. How does the council address those issues in your report?
Well, I agree with that very much, and that's what I'm referring to in my comments, that you have to be sure that you have a way for people to recognize the issue early. In our DuPont company, we have people that are assigned to that job. And I think it's also very important that people know that when they report something through whatever system a company has, they know how it's going to be handled. Because an organization sometimes can be very worried about getting too much help too fast. And so I think to know that the information should come out and be handled appropriately and not an overreaction is very important.
Can you give us a real-life example of a company that does manage risk well and what it does? What lessons it can give to other companies?
An example from the panel this morning that Jerry led was around Walmart. And I think as you go through the hurricanes we had this year, it's their fundamental quality of their supply chain, their supply systems, how they could respond, how they care for their employees, and how they did the fundamental training of their employees. So when you could not describe Katrina in some kind of a manual, their people knew what it took to make the on-the-spot decisions to come through it very well.
How many threats does DuPont face at any given time?
Besides all the members of the press that are here today? Is that we started this work well before the council did. We decided we were going to put together one chart on one piece of paper that talked about all the risk. And we called it the eyeball chart because you had to have something else to be able to read it. And that was the aha to us. There are just hundreds of different types of risk we could have. And I think every organization represented by the council's work could say the same thing. And so it's about building that robust capability. And it's not about kind of identifying each one. And I think that's the biggest lesson now. And that would be my advice to boards of directors and audit committees, be it in the university setting or in the company setting, is don't try to make a list of everything, making sure you have that robust system.
What would be the biggest risks that DuPont would be facing?
The data would say that a major failure in our systems, which we are redundant in multiple ways, would probably be the most serious risk to us. And I feel very comfortable about that piece.
Will we be prepared for the next Katrina or 9/11 or major disaster of any type? And if not, what more needs to be done?
Well, that's fundamentally what we were addressing in the report. And the idea of being able to list everything that could happen and be prepared for each one is just not practical. What is practical is to make sure we have the communication systems that are in place. At the time of some of these early events, the communication systems to connect heads of major companies were extremely weak. They are much, much better today. And so no matter what the next situation is, I am sure we can rally the private infrastructure much better today than we could 5 years ago, but we must keep improving.
We have traditions at the National Press Club. One is that every speaker goes away with a certificate. And because coffee keeps us resilient in the morning, the National Press Club coffee mug. Sure. And I have to tell you, our last question is often a little different in tone than our earlier questions. This one is really almost kind of existential in nature. It's from someone here who asks, if nothing sticks to Teflon, how does Teflon stick to the pan?
It's a miracle of science from DuPont. Thank you so much. Speaking for the council, I just not Teflon. Look, this is some good work. And when we started this work 3 or 4 years ago, I wasn't sure if we were going to find a pony in there or not. And in this idea of resilience are the answers to a lot of these questions. And so I really sincerely urge everyone here to take a look at this piece of work because I think it can make a difference for our country. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for coming today.